Come with us on a journey to a place where information is unlocked, knowledge is gained, and the exchange of experiences welcome. This is the Knowledge Exchange, presented by Lakeland Community College.
So we're going to go ahead and get started with some introductions first off before we get into the presentation. Before I begin who I am and what I'm about, I'd like to introduce a couple of colleagues of mine that are joining us this afternoon. Christy Alessia and Mark Ruth are here. Mark Ruth is the Executive Director of Smart Recovery USA, and Christy is the Assistant Executive Director. Thank you both for attending today. I also see Ali Adenaro is here. She is head of our marketing and special events with Fund. So thank you again for attending, my colleagues. And to everyone that's joining us today, thank you so much for being here. It's a real true honor to be here. So Dennis and Philip, thank you for putting this together. I also see Dr. Browner's in attendance. Thank you, sir, for being here. Always a pleasure. And I am honored to be here to talk to you today about smart recovery. So a little bit about who I am. My name is Mike Hooper. I am the State Outreach Director for Ohio for Smart Recovery USA. I am also a recovery myself, 20 years of alcoholism and clinical depression dual diagnosis. Prior to Smart Recovery, way back in the lovely state of New Jersey, I battled with alcoholism for most of my adolescent and adult life. I started with alcohol very early on. 13 years old was my first exposure to it, and it carried me all the way into my adulthood and well into my professional life. I'm also a veteran of the United States Armed Forces, Army 2nd and 113th, 42nd Infantry Division, Cavalry Scout Unit, veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom, Guantanamo Bay from 04 to 05. And alcohol was with me and depression was with me all the way. And it was an extremely disruptive force in my life, caused me to lose more opportunities, friendships, connections, and trust of people that I cared about, that I love, and that were important to me than I can even begin to tell you in the time frame that we have. I attempted recovery many times. None were successful. I was incarcerated for DUIs eventually in my 30s, and I started to lose hope. It was becoming very bleak, and I finally reached out to a veteran organization in Connecticut that put me into a program that featured smart recovery. And when that happened, my life literally changed. And smart recovery was the answer that I was looking for, as were many of the other veterans that were involved in that program. Besides hope, it gave us purpose and direction. And that's something that I hope to articulate today when I go through this presentation. So please understand, when I do talk about this program, it's not from a sense of sales. It's not from a sense of financial or professional duty. This is an honor to be here because this program literally saved my life. And the more people that get to know about this program, I believe the aspects of change to combat this epidemic is much better in the eyes of those that are suffering from addictive and destructive behaviors. So no technical issues aside, I'm going to try to share my screen here and start the presentation. So quick word on the Q&A aspect. We're going to do this at the end of the presentation just to keep it organized, because as I'm sharing, I won't be able to see the chat. So I don't want to ignore any questions you have. Feel free to add them into the chat as Philip is monitoring them. And after the presentation, we will go back to it and answer any questions that are in the chat. For those that don't want to come on the mic, it's perfectly fine as well. So just you could just leave all your questions to the end, and we will have an open floor for anybody who has any questions about the presentation. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. All right. So as I mentioned, this is Smart Recovery. So SMART stands for self-management and recovery training. Self-management and recovery training. The aspects of the self-management and training are very specific and special to what our program is all about, and we'll get into that later. Our mission statement is to offer no fee, self-empowering, evidence-based, face-to-face and online support groups for those desiring to abstain from any substance or activity addiction. SMART is an abstinence-oriented program, and we'll get into a more clear definition of what abstinence-oriented means in a little bit. And the quote from Reinhold Newgard at the end there is one I've always personally liked: change what cannot be accepted and accept what cannot be changed. You've heard that in similar programs, I'm sure, because truth is truth. Regardless of what program people follow. What works. And that's one of the things that we emphasize in Smart Recovery, using the power of choice. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing and why. And it is the crisis. The crisis of the epidemic of addiction is very real, and it has only got more evident with COVID-19. Alcohol, opioids, cocaine, problematic behaviors, other narcotic drugs, and prescription uses, overdoses, and addiction rates have skyrocketed since the start of COVID-19. And why is that? Because many services, due to our efforts to contain the virus, unfortunately have impacted the recovery community heavily. We've lost a lot of our ability to reach out to those that are in need, due to the fact that many people relied on services that were face-to-face, community centers, RCOs, churches, treatment facilities, and so forth. So even though, as you can see on the right-hand side, there are many organizations that do fight this epidemic every day, it is still a heavy burden to us, especially with the problems that we have going on with COVID. So presentations like this are very important. Educational exchanges and informational exchanges about recovery programs are very vital, because the more we get the word out, the more ears we reach, and more people that need help can find out that these services are indeed available. What is great about Smart Recovery is that we were born online, and I'll get into that in a little bit, which helped us to adapt to this terrible pandemic of COVID-19 by moving many of our resources to our already existing online platform. So we are still struggling against it, and this is why it's very important to get the word about what we do out to the masses. So a little bit about our history and reach. We were established in 1994. The brilliant people that started this program needed a way to get in touch with other participants and co-founders around the country and even around the world. So there was this new snazzy invention called the internet that they decided to utilize instead of getting on the phone and starting all those three-way calls. I know I'm showing my age right now with the three-way calls. If you're not laughing right now, don't worry about it. You don't need to get into it. You missed a very boring time of history. But anyway, Smart was started online in 1994. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization and volunteer driven. We only have 17 actual employees of the company. We have over 3,000 volunteers just in the United States and Canada alone. As you can see on the right-hand side, there are over 2,500 face-to-face mutual aid groups that are established for Smart Recovery, many of which have been moved on to the online platform now that COVID has restricted our movements. And we are in 26 countries around the world, which is our international reach, which is growing every day. And on our Smart Recovery online platform, we have 52 weekly online meetings that are national, that reach from coast to coast. I myself facilitate 2 meetings of that site for veterans and first responders. And they are available every week from our website, which I'll show you at the end of the presentation. All right, a little bit about our fundamentals. It's ever changing. This program is adaptable. We are an evidence-based program, and by evidence-based, we use what works. And those that are involved with this program that help create the tools and techniques that make up what Smart Recovery is are always on the lookout for new techniques and ideas that are helpful for those suffering from addiction. So we adapt to the needs expressed by the medical staffs and behavioral psychologists of scientific and evidence-based practices in recovery. So SMART is an excellent supplemental program. It works very well in tandem with other programs that are already in existence. And we'll get a little bit into that when we talk about how participants interact with the program specifically. It does have its roots in rational recovery originally before it became Smart Recovery. And the initial advisory board included the likes of the greats Dr. Aaron Beck, Dr. Albert Ellis, they're responsible for the creation of cognitive behavioral therapy and rational emotive behavioral therapy, and Dr. DiClemente, who was one of the co-founders of the Stages of Change, who still is heavily involved with Smart today, spoke at our last face-to-face conference in Chicago, which was an honor to hear. A little bit about what our facilitators do in our meetings. We are trained. Our facilitators are trained in this program. I myself am a facilitator still, even as an employee of this company. And the meeting facilitators do not tell, rather. They listen and facilitate Crosstalk, which I'll get into in a little bit. They learn and use tools from CBT and REBT by attending a 30-hour training before running meetings. So the good thing about Smart Recovery is no matter where you are, whether that be in the US, Canada, South America, the UK, Australia, you walk into a Smart Recovery meeting, you know exactly what you're getting, because the facilitators take pride in the fact that we learn this and we practice this through the guidelines that are taught through these courses and through the fundamentals that we learn through our handbook. So, how we've been interacting with schools, this gets a little bit in tandem for what we're doing today here at Lakeland Community. And we just wanted to show that there was a study done by Baldwin Wallace about addiction services offered in schools within Ohio. And so these are some of the participating schools that you see here on the sheet, on the screen before you. And reason being, I myself know from personal experience, many of these aspects of addiction start very early. If they don't start in the home, they are often introduced by peers in facilities like schools, believe it or not. When I was a kid, for those that were studying in college, Ritalin was the big problematic pill popper for those that wanted to be active. I know Adderall has taken the place of that recently, but it is a problem. I know I've spoken to many young adults in our groups that I hold during our local community groups that still mention their times in college and universities when they started that as an innocent way of staying awake and being able to study that gatewayed into other problematic behaviors. So the study was conducted about services that are offered on campuses within these college communities. And here are some of the results so you guys get an idea of what's going on from those colleges. So from those educational facilities that we featured, the addiction services offered were 13 for yes and 7 for no. So, a little bit over 50% for the yes for that. Services offered for free, however, that number dropped, okay? So to 9 to 4, all right? And then now we get even more specific about on-campus addiction treatment training offered. That goes almost completely 50% from 7 to no to 6 to yes. Then online services. So for the campuses that don't have a physical location, they did have services provided online. It was 9 for yes, 4 for no. And willingness to offer addiction treatment services. So that means they had an interest, but they haven't actually moved on it yet. But 10 of them did say yes, they were interested in beginning some type of treatment services for their faculty and staff. So just to give you an idea of the participation and why it's so important to conduct outreach within the educational community, because it starts the students that that I once was, and many I know that are attending today. We have a very open mind when we attend higher learning. We want to know about what's going on in the world. So these are great opportunities to speak to people before these problems, such as addiction and problematic behavior, become a plague on so many of our lives. And it's a great opportunity to reach people and get the word out at the start of these things, so we might have a chance to fight the problem before it begins. So there have been members of the student and faculties of numerous educational facilities that have decided to train as facilitators of SMART after learning about our program through the outreach efforts made by our team. And this goes all the way from Perry Local Schools in Lake County here to the Ohio State University. And I had to practice that because I'm from North Jersey, and I promised I would not mispronounce how to say the Ohio State University. But just to give you an idea, I mean, there's no such thing as too early to begin education about addiction awareness. So when those that are interested show that they would like to learn about these subject matters, those in Smart Recovery, the team that's here located in Mentor, Ohio, are always on task to be able to conduct presentations like we're doing today and spread awareness and answer any questions that those might have who would be interested in learning. All right, so let's get into some fundamental differentiators about Smart Recovery that makes us stand out from other programs. There are a lot of programs out there that treat addiction, and there is no such thing as a program that's better than another. Each programs have their unique traits, and we just want to get into a couple of them here for Smart Recovery, because that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about this program and what it's about, what makes us different. And by the end of this, you'll have an idea of where we stand, what we represent, and what our values are. So let's start at the beginning. So we have what we saw is evidence-based, creation by addiction recovery professionals based on CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and MI, motivational interviewing techniques. So that goes back to where I mentioned of our facilitators training in the the 30-hour course, we learn about where these techniques come from and what they stand for and how they represent. So we do, being that it is evidence-based, it gives us the advantage of being an ever-changing program. We're always adapting to new ideas that have shown promise and in the recovery community. So, as I mentioned before, we'll get a little bit more into abstinence-oriented. By Smart Recovery is presenting abstinence as the desirable option. Most attendees have had sufficient adverse experience to make abstinence a desired goal. So, in Smart Recovery, we do not tell our participants what to do. We don't give advice. It is literally the power of choice. The options are presented, and we help the participants come to the conclusion which is most optimal for their recovery. So many, as I can speak for myself through the groups that I've led and through myself alone, realize that through our experience with addiction, abstinence is the best model to keep our problematic behavior at bay. Also, we deal with multiple types of addictive disorders in Smart Recovery. For instance, eating disorders, which the option of being completely abstinent from eating isn't something that's actually rational or even indeed able to be done by a human being. We still have to eat. But the tools that we learn in Smart Recovery can help those facing disorders that are essential to life to control their urges, cravings, and problematic behavior. So then again, learning self-management of the addiction aspect of those activities create an abstinence base to those activities for it. So it becomes a effective new technique and way of life. So we are also MAT friendly, supports the scientifically informed use of psychological treatment and prescribed psychiatric and addiction medication. So in short, not to get into a long drawn out definition of that, we do support MAT, so long as it is followed by the guidelines and rules by the medical professionals offering that treatment. First Amendment adherence. Courts have consistently ruled that alternatives to 12-step recovery may be offered under the First Amendment. This is one that is particularly close to home for me, as I did go through the unfortunate process of the judicial system due to my addictive behavior. And SMART was not there for me. And I was not someone who adhered to a 12-step program because I was not in a position or a mindset to utilize my faith, which I was brought up with, or trust in my recovery at that point. I was not ready to accept those concepts as a way to get better. So it was very ineffective to be forced into a program, because not only did I not agree with the fundamentals, but being that it was forced upon me, it lost the ideal of being helpful. It became part of the punishment. So courts, thankfully, around the country now are becoming more open-minded to the idea of choice and treating this as a medical and treatment issue rather than a criminal one. And with this, we increase the odds of people actually rehabilitating and freeing themselves from the vicious cycle that happens when you get involved with addiction-related crimes that have a high return cycle rate to reincarceration after the first time. And self-empowering, my favorite part of this program. We help each other find his or own power and best path to recovery. What I loved about Smart Recovery when I first was introduced to it was the first thing my facilitator said in that VA was, what did I want for my future? And I had never been asked that before on the aspect of recovery, and immediately clicked something inside me. And I immediately found interest and purpose again, because I had never been given the opportunity to choose. And Smart Recovery's pathway does that. It gives the participant the power of choice. What I really love about this program is that the program adapts to the participant. The participant does not have to adapt to Smart Recovery. Being that we are an ever-changing, evidence-based program, we incorporate many fundamentals to create a balanced pathway of recovery for the participant in the program. So in my groups, I always reference fingerprints. Recovery pathways are very similar to fingerprints. Although they look similar, each and every one of them are individualistic when you get closer. And I believe that that's very proven when it comes to, and parallel when it comes to speaking about recovery pathways. So some of our position statements. Disease model. I know many of us in this room have heard of the disease theory, whether or not addiction is a disease, or if it's a disorder, or if it's just a cognitive choice. So as you can see here from the listing, approximately 40% of smart participants surveyed believe that their addiction is a disease. About 40% don't believe it is. However, both groups found the program helpful in combating their addictive behavior. What I like, again, about this program is that it's effective regardless of what you believe, whether or not it is a disease or not. These tools are used as life skills. So whether or not your belief system is a disease, or if it's just a mental disorder, or if it's something that you can choose whether or not to do, using these tools and utilizing the training that you receive in Smart Recovery is effective regardless. And that's really good because it keeps the door open to both aspects of the recovery communities that feature both trains of thought. Spirituality, the use of religious or spiritual beliefs and practices in recovery is a personal choice for Smart Recovery, but not part of the Smart Recovery program. So an example of that, I was brought up in faith. I was brought up in a Lutheran and Catholic household. I went to church every single Sunday growing up. I do believe in God. I do believe in a higher power. However, it was not part of my recovery program in the beginning, especially when I was going through, as I mentioned, the incarceration phase. I had reached a very, very dark point in my life where spirituality did not help because I felt abandoned. And so being bombarded by aspects of faith were not very helpful for me. So for a long time in my recovery, as I began my journey, I did not use my spirituality as a form of mental wellness or spiritual wellness. It did develop afterwards. Again, because Smart Recovery is open to different pathways, I was able to reestablish my faith within my recovery program, but that took time and training. So, but the good news is the program works either way, whether you have it right from the beginning as a tool that you use for your recovery or you do not. The program is still effective. Medication, as we mentioned before, we support the scientifically informed use of psychological treatment and legally prescribed psychiatric and addiction medication, as long as it is followed by the rules and guidelines of the medical professionals prescribing it. Personal labels. SMART does not promote the use of personal labels, but accepts one's use of labels as a personal choice. And we're going to get into this a little later on in the presentation, but I did want to just say this one thing about it now, is that there are certain labels that can be used as identifiers for people. When we're talking about recovery, that usually goes to the addiction or drug of choice, i.e., hi, I'm Michael, I'm an alcoholic, and I suffer from clinical depression. I don't use these when I introduce myself because in my experience, they have hindered me with my motivation because I believe there's more to me than my labels. So it's something that I do not use. However, many people in Smart Recovery use their labels as a sense of strength. It's a way to focus and remind themselves what they are fighting so very hard for in their training. So the use of labels is optional with Smart Recovery. And finally, abstinence versus moderation. And as I mentioned before, Smart Recovery is an abstinence-oriented organization. Okay, so language is very, very, very important in Smart Recovery. During the training as a facilitator, we go through many hours of proper language use when incorporating and guiding a meeting. The use of I statements is essential. This also creates a sense of ownership and management for the participant. Rather than speaking for a group of people or the people in the meeting space by saying words like we or you, using I statements refocuses your subject matter upon you. So you are focused on your thoughts, feelings, and actions. Again, as we mentioned, labels are optional. So if it's helpful to the participant, we encourage it. If it's not, we ask them, is there something else that you can do? What else would be helpful? Would it be helpful for you to use just who you are rather than having to always label yourself by your drug of choice, giving them the option to choose their pathway. We discourage the use of absolute statements. So haves to, can't, must. The reason that we discourage these is because when you use statements such as have to, can't, must, gotta, need, whatever, you close the door on options. And then what happens, especially in recovery, motivation is so vital in recovery. So when you use situations that you only give yourself one option, what happens if that option fails when you're in recovery? What happens when that have to becomes something you cannot achieve realistically? A lot of times, many people in recovery get discouraged. They get demoralistic attitude towards their recovery path, and it can be very detrimental. So we encourage the word exchange within our program. So we find other pathways to have to. For instance, I have to go to this meeting on Monday night. Oh my God! Rather than saying I choose to go to this meeting or I get to go to this meeting, as in I am choosing recovery as my way of life now, rather than going back to my addictive behavior. This is a choice I'm making. By doing it, it turns the statement into something positive and empowering, because it makes it my choice, not someone else's. War stories, i.e. drunkalogs or glorification of past behavior, can be very counterproductive. Getting into the comparisons of who lived a better addictive life has not shown any type of real results of being helpful in your recovery journey. So we discourage them during our meetings because they also can be very triggering for some people. As I mentioned before, we address many different types of addiction symptoms within Smart Recovery. There's not just any one type. So when sharing our check-ins during our meetings, it's important to keep in mind that these type of discussions are best when they are progressive about your recovery. So we emphasize about being in the present moment, using your past as a lesson rather than something to stick to or glorify or use as representation for who you are now. Smart recovery is progressive recovery. We are always moving forward, and that's what we like to move. As it shows in the next line, we like to use our past experiences as a learning tool. Okay, failures are not shunned or reprimanded in Smart Recovery. We analyze them. We look at what went wrong. We find out what happened, and we go back to it to find out if there's a new or different effective method that we can change about the event that caused the problem, and then start a new pathway forward. So let's get a little bit into what Crosstalk is, because Crosstalk is very vital. Crosstalk facilitators are trained in the motivational interviewing, use of open-ended questions. What happens when you behave this way? What's it like for you? This gives the participant a chance to use their ideas, use what they're thinking, rather than the closed conversational techniques of yes and no answers, where it doesn't give a conversation a lot of ways to go. We encourage the participants to come up with their own ideas about their recovery. Positive affirmations. We are impressed by how you're handling that urge. It's important. I stress this all the time in my meetings. Celebrate the little victories. For all my movie buffs out there, rule number 32, enjoy the little things from Zombieland. Something I always bring up in my meetings. It's good. Many of us in recovery have lost the ability to feel good about ourselves in the beginning of recovery, and learning to train your brain about recognizing when there are good things happening and they are still possible for you to do is very, very important in this program. And it's shown to, when you see someone in recovery realize for the first time that they have used a tool effectively against their addictive disorders, the light that comes on in their eyes, there's nothing like it in the world. It really is a powerful thing to see. And then use of reflective listening. I get the sense you feel that there are things standing in your way of your changes you may want to need or make. Again, I'm not giving the advice of what you would like to do as a facilitator. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to guide you to come to the answers that are best for your recovery journey. And then providing summary statements, just showing that we're listening, showing that we're empathetic to what's going on. What steps might you take to start initiating the changes you want to make? So you are the key component in finding the answers you seek. It is all about the participants in the program. So a quick lesson on labels. So we had a participant who was willing to go through a little breakdown of their life. It was a male, middle-class upbringing, moderate to advanced education, showed aptitude in language, writing, and athletics, okay? And what you see on the right is some of the things that happened in this person's life that were detrimental and caused certain titles to be put to their descriptions when they were talked about in summary. So due to their parents' divorce, they were broken home child, which can cause issues for upbringings, and became a problem child in school, did not do well in school, labeled as having difficulty with authority, and then later diagnosed with ADHD. And by the age of 17, became a dropout, was done with school, received a GED due to the fact that this gentleman was intelligent, but just did not adhere to the school idealistics, so they went that route. but still labeled as a dropout because that was what was prominent. And then from the ages of 18 to 34, became a functioning alcoholic, quote unquote, and later referred to as a simple drunk, bouncing from homes, careers, friends, and relationships almost on a yearly basis, and was arrested by the time during this time for minor offenses. And by the age of 35, that subject had failed to completely rehabilitate and became a convict. In that same year, spent 4 months in Carl Robinson Penitentiary due to a second DUI. So, if you take a moment and think about where this person is now in their life, because this survey was done about 3 years ago. So where would you think this person is, looking at these titles that many of the people who use to describe this person thought of? Most people that are asked that question usually think that they're not in a good place right now. Well, that person's actually me. All this stuff is about me. So this is a testament to how labels can be very misleading, and they can not show you the complete picture of who a person is. So it's a lesson to be very careful when making judgment calls just based simply on labels. So quick rundown of cognitive behavioral therapy and rational emotive behavioral therapy, based on one simple principle: what we believe and how we think leads to how we feel and how we respond to life situations. So for those that are not, genius college bound like me, this was a great way to understand these very, very essential theories in therapy. And so a little bit about the breakdown of Smart Recovery's values and core. We follow a 4-point program, which is a guide through our recovery journey. We don't have a linear step program per se. We use the 4-point program to adhere to the tools and techniques that we use that become our successful life skills through our recovery journey. And these are building and maintaining motivation, coping with urges, managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and living a balanced life. And we'll get into a little bit detail in the next slides moving forward. All are important to recover any form of addictive behavior within Smart Recovery. It is also a way of organizing the recovery information. So as we learn our tools as facilitators and as participants, we also identify where they fit within the 4-point program. It also gives us a reference point when we identify new problems or events in our life that may be problematic to our addiction. We can say, oh, this is a motivational issue. Oh, I'm identifying an issue that's dealing with urges or triggers. And we can associate it with a point of the program, which then associates it with a tool. All right. So real quick, and this is for my semi-interactive part of the presentation, for you to think about, okay? So what are your impressions of these two statements real quick, all right? So the first one, it's not life's challenging events that cause problems for me. Rather, it is my unhealthy or irrational response to those events that give rise to many of my behavioral problems. Okay? And then the next one says, when I overcome my addiction to substances and or unhealthy activities, the problems I now experience will all go away. Okay, so these are statements that have been made by those in recovery before. And we'll get to the differences behind the two in a moment. But just think about these two. What are your impressions about these two people that are saying these sentences within their recovery program? And where do you think their headspace is? Okay, so do you feel addictive behavior or addiction is limited to only substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, or other forms of self-medication, etc., and or activities like gambling or eating disorders? Okay, so many people who, when we talk about addiction, and we've asked these in our face-to-face presentations before, we get a lot of answers that correlate to what we read on the top. But can displays of anger become a repeated behavior? Can resentment become an ongoing challenge? Can excessive expectations become addictive, i.e. musting? Can the act of always being judgmental towards others become addictive in nature? So from those statements we read earlier, we can also associate certain types of addictive behavior with expectations. So thinking that because I manage my addiction and my addictive and destructive behaviors, all the problems in my life are going to go away. This is not a realistic or rational way of thinking, because problems just don't miraculously disappear because I'm no longer using my drug of choice. Life is still life. We still have to live and things and challenges will still come about. So having the expectation that all my problems will disappear once I live a life of sobriety can be problematic. And we explore that when people have that sense of thought process to help them realize what other things may exist even beyond sobriety. So there are emotional and thought processes that also can become addictive behaviors. All right, so is it fair to state the following? You and I are in full control of two basic things. And so you don't have to worry about being on a test or nothing. I just put the answers in there for you. So the answers are our choices and how we respond to thoughts, feelings, and life events. Even though it might not be in our control of what happens to us around our lives, we can control how we respond to them. Emotions are a part of life. They are not bad or good. They're just part of being human. However, we can control and we can manage how we respond to those emotional events or those thought processes. And that's something that we learn in Smart Recovery. Learning to respond rationally to life events would be a very healthy and useful skill for all of us. As I mentioned before, these are not skills that are just restricted to recovery options. Many of these tools are very, very useful in life, and we'll get into a couple of examples in a moment. So having established this, when working with your meeting attendees or clients, would you rather have influence or authority? I know there are those in the audience today that work in fields relative to mental health and addiction recovery. So think about that. What would you rather have when dealing with your clients? Would you rather have authority over what they are going to decide and how they move forward in their recovery, or would you rather influence them to their path? So the answer is the use of influence. Smart Recovery believes in the power of choice. Our meetings highlight motivational interviewing, as I mentioned earlier, and cognitive and behavioral CBT and REB tools, as well as meeting attendee crosstalk and information sharing, which is very vital because we learn from each other in Smart Recovery, which is one of our great strengths. Arriving at one's personal hierarchy of values, which are the points in our lives that are important to us. What gives us drive? What gives us purpose? What is our pillars of strength that we stand on that are influencing our choice to change, and defining one's lifestyle balance. Point 4 of Smart Recovery is my personal favorite of building a balanced lifestyle, because even after removing your addictive behavior or drug of choice, there's still life to live. And learning that life in recovery can be so powerful and so positive is a great experience within this program. So with the preceding in mind, can you make your patients or clients change? Can you make me change? Can you make your spouse or partner change? What if I say smart meeting attendees can change, but we cannot make them change, i.e. word exchange? See how that same thing changes around the definition of what we're trying to say. If you agree with this, then how can we affect change in our meeting attendees and others? And simple, by helping them reach the power of choice that's best for their recovery. So a little bit about our point system really quickly. Point 1, maintaining motivation to abstain. CBT and REBT are the other tools used to support this point. So the stages of change, which I mentioned earlier that Dr. DiClemente was part of, the 5 stages are pre-contemplation, contemplation, determination, action, maintenance. What do you want? What are you going to do about it? How do you feel about what you're doing? If you ever go on to Smart Recovery TV on YouTube and look up the great Dr. Gerstein's meeting about what Smart Recovery is, those are the 3 questions that he asked in the beginning of recovery, which have always stood with me because they are very powerful, especially the last one about how you're feeling about what you're doing. Because especially if you're using external motivation for recovery, how you feel about it may be negative, and that might impact your recovery journey. The change of plan worksheet is very important because it helps us structure our recovery goals and making sure that they are specific, measurable, achievable, rational, and timeward bound. The cost-benefit analysis is the pros and cons of using and not using and abstaining and not abstaining. And the great thing about our program is that we identify whether or not these pros and cons have short and long-term benefits or consequences. And again, the hierarchy of values that I mentioned earlier, what is most important to you? Point 2, coping with urges and triggers. Learning to understand rational and irrational thinking, responses, triggers, urge coping, and strategy. The use of urge logs. So we found that documenting when urges and triggers occur are very, very helpful for those in recovery and Smart Recovery, because we find out that certain situations, certain events, even certain times of day can be triggering to certain people. And knowing when these things happen, help us prepare for them, help us have the tools ready to combat any urges or triggers that might be influenced by these events or certain of the logs. So disputing irrational beliefs, one of the workhorses of our program. Learning to understand that we can challenge these irrational thoughts or emotions that are happening due to events or due to our addictive or destructive behavior. And then the DEADS tool, delay, deny, escape, attack, avoid, accept, distract, or substitute. I call this one of my crisis management tools, because this is a great tool to use during an urge that gives you multiple options to get out of a situation that may be causing an urge or trigger. Okay, maintaining thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So, unconditional self-acceptance. One of my favorite tools, but one of the most complicated to master because it takes a hard look at yourself, and not just looking at self-worth or self-esteem, but accepting that there are mistakes that I've made in my life, but they are not all of who I am. Everything about me, including my desire to change and who I've become as a recovery, also encompasses a large part of who I am. So I learned from my mistakes and I've become stronger for it. So they are no longer a sense of shame for me. I look at them as the tools that I needed to learn to become a stronger person. And we learn about the damage of musting, closing those doors of options, as I mentioned earlier. We learn word exchange to be able to turn situations that may be damning for many of our addictive behaviors to something that then creates hope for change. Helpful and unhelpful things, release and responses. The way we think influences the way we feel influences the way we act. And then finally, the relapse danger signals. Understanding when we are susceptible to relapse. Many people in recovery notice that relapse starts way before we pick up the drug of choice or the behavior. It can start days before. Learning the warning signs in our life and our recovery pathway, again, helps us to combat those issues. And then finally, living a balanced lifestyle. So that lovely chart of my on the right-hand side is my lovely Southpaw handwriting. Yes, that is me there. What we do, this is the Lifestyle Balance Pie assessment sheet. It's a way of looking at where our life is and the things that are important to us and how we rate our interaction with those aspects in our daily life. So as you see, I have family, love, being a dad, purpose, faith, fitness, sobriety, and sense of self. So the number scale rates from 0 to 10, 10 being that I feel very strongly that I'm doing well in those aspects, 0 meaning that I'm not doing well at all in those aspects. And what we do is we create a wheel and see if the closer to a circle that becomes, the more balanced our lifestyle is. And when it's not, we know that there are things that we need to work on by looking at our number scale. And it's helpful that this tool is dated. Every 6 months, we go back to this and look at how we're doing in our pathway in recovery. So we've identified what is a balanced life and why it's important, adding meaning to life, not just stuff, filling our time with things that we think are supposed to be important. No, what actually matters to you? What actually makes you feel good about living? We identify those things with tools like Vital, Absorbing Creative Interest, or VACI, the hobbies and interests that we may have abandoned during our addictive behavior or could not participate in because we were in the thralls of addiction. We get them back and we learn to enjoy them without being slaves to that addiction. And again, as a lifestyle balance pie, but please, if you're going to do this, please write neater than me because it's just, I know it's hard to look at. I apologize. So for more information on this program, this is our website, www.smartrecovery.org, and you come to the page here. As you can see, it has everything from about us to our bookshop, which has great reading material on there. Gives you some notes about our current volunteers, as well as our toolbox, all these great tools that I mentioned. Many of them are listed for free right on our website to get into. Training, if you would like to become involved as a volunteer in Smart Recovery, there's information about becoming a trainer, training in the program, and then videos that also give tips and tools based off our 4-point program and our Smart Recovery handbook. So anything you'd like to find about our online communities can also be found here within the search bar, and more information about those that we serve within the community. And then finally, folks, recovery is about saving lives. This is something I feel very adamantly, and it's one of the striving forces for my recovery journey. We are stronger together. I meant what I said in the beginning of this program. There is no such thing as one program being better than another. We are strongest when we incorporate all forms of recovery to make a balanced platform for those that are seeking change to find that change and live a successful, healthy, and well lifestyle. And that's something I truly believe in. So stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you for listening today. And I will open up the floor to some questions. So let's just get to this. Okay, so thank you very much for listening today. And I will now take the floor for questions for all those that would like to answer some.
I'll just read the question for you, and that way you can just you can work on the answers, and I'll work on the questions.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
It's like Jeopardy now. First of all, thank you for the awesome presentation. This is from Ken Browner at Lakeland. Can you tell us a little bit about the opportunities for in-person groups after the pandemic?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. So the website that I brought up earlier has all the information about our meetings and locations. If you go onto our website, and click on the online community, you'll find the listings for these communities. I can actually do a quick share and show you what this looks like. So those that are looking online can actually see this for themselves. So the next time you go about it, you can do this yourself. So if you can see that, all you have to do is look at find a meeting, find a local meeting, click on this, and then location screen will pop up. So I'll use my local meeting in Medina, Ohio, as an example. So you click on that, Medina will pop up. And then as you can see, all the information and locations in that general area will pop up here. Now, the good news about what the doctor was asking about is you can find out details about these programs right inside the Q box. So as you can see, my meeting is actually hybrid currently, in person and online. Following the CDC guidelines, we are able to have a limited in-person attendance as well as feature it on Zoom. So this is the function that you can use to find out meeting details about meetings in your area. You can click on these for more details. It'll give you information about the actual location, address, what's required to be in person. As you can see, max occupancy is 10 people, and there's hand sanitizers and masks are mandatory, and 6 feet of social distancing is a must. And we also have the Zoom link to how to attend. So when you have questions about meetings in your area, that is a way you can go about, excuse me, hang on a second. Yeah, that's how we go about going through that to look for there. So if you have questions about where you are for your meeting and what you can do about that, you can find that right on the website, depending on where you are in those locations. If you can't find anything in your area, you can also look on the community board, and it will give you the national meetings that are hosted 7 days a week through all times during the day, Monday through Sunday, so that there's always an option for a meeting available, even during the pandemic. So many meetings are coming back to face-to-face as restrictions are lifting. So as they change, our updates will change as well.
Our next question is they want to get some contact information for you and probably for the larger group. They were interested in a phone number most of all, but I'm sure email addresses and web addresses are all fun things to include.
Yeah, it's actually, absolutely. So I can actually type that in the chat, make life easy for everybody. But my email address is mhooper@smartrecovery.org. And that has all my contact information on it. So if you'd like to get more information from me or like to talk to me personally, I am at everyone's disposal. So as you can see, I love to talk, so I'm always there to be able to do it. So please let me know if there's anything I can do for anybody who's attending today. I would be most honored. And oh, it's not sending. Okay, I can't send. So it's not letting me send it into the Q&A, but it's mhooper, HOOPER, @smartrecovery.org.
The next question we have is from Lakeland professor Doug Webb. He wants to thank you for sharing all of this and wants to know if you could share an example of a challenging or an interesting case of someone, obviously with their name removed, that you have worked with.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I can do something recently. My last Monday meeting, very, very, very serious topic happened. One of our participants is also a facilitator in the program, and he works part-time as a peer support specialist in the Cleveland area. And he unfortunately just experienced a loss of a peer that he had been mentoring that had overdosed. And he felt a lot of guilt. He felt a lot of shame. He felt very, very responsible. He was using a lot of phrases like, I should have done more. What could I have done? What would have changed that person's aspect? And we had a very somber conversation about it. The whole group was able to crosstalk and chime in about, helping this individual come to a realization that we use tools which we call the hula hoop tool, which helps us understand our locus of control and the things that we can and cannot affect. And unfortunately, one of those things as leaders in the recovery field that we have to come to bear with is that we cannot make someone change, as we said in the presentation. And even though we learn these lessons, it's very, very difficult when it's a personal aspect. It's harder to adhere to, even though you know these things as part of the training. When you're hit with the realization that now your life has been affected by the loss of somebody that you were trying to guide and mentor, it's very real. But through a very emotional conversation, through the meeting, we were able to reaffirm his confidence, commitment, because he is an exceptional facilitator and peer supporter. I know him personally, and we got back to, with positive affirmations, reminding him of all the lives he has touched, all the lives he has helped save, so many people that still rely on him. And as unfortunate and tragic as it was that this person chose to go back to their addictive behavior, the blame was not on him. And we can't tell people what to do. We can't tell people that this is what must be done. The path is chosen by those in recovery, and that was something that we spent the meeting reminding each other of, that there are choices that we make due to what we can and cannot control, and accepting the fact that these are aspects of my recovery, not only pathway for myself, but through my choice of mentoring and guiding others, that I have to accept the fact that others will make their own decisions, and I can only do my best to guide them when they come to me, speaking about the program. So that was something that really was very impactful, because it was recent, and it's to a friend. So I hope that answers the question that he's asking for the professor.
At the moment, that's everything that's in the chat and all of the Q&A. So we'll just leave it open for another minute or so to see if anything else pops in. But otherwise, that might be it, Mike.
Everyone, again, like I had mentioned before, it's an absolute honor to be here today. And I hope this will not be the last time I get to speak on behalf of Smart Recovery to Lakeland Community College. And thank you all for being in attendance today. And I look forward to our communiques moving forward.